Ocean Hills at its best is when we are in it together.
So we had a little opening question about words that came to mind when you heard the words brother and sister. So how many have brothers and sisters? So a lot of us. And so maybe those words trigger some emotions, good ones and bad ones. Well, how many here have 2 or more children? Okay, so there's some who do. So even if you have only 1 child or 1 on the way, and you aren't dealing with sibling issues, at least not yet, I'm hoping some of the things we talk about today will be helpful in guiding your child in relationships with friends and family. And I do, for those of you who feel compelled to take notes no matter what the subject, I have a handout, so you don't have to. So it kind of summarizes what I'm going to talk about. So unless you're totally into it, just put the pencil down. And I want to start out with, what is the sweetest sound to a mom? Well, next to hearing the vacuum cleaner running when you're sick in bed, the sweetest sound is the laughter of her children playing happily together. And I think people have known this even before vacuums. And I think it was a mom that wrote in Psalm 133:1, "How wonderful it is, how pleasant when brothers live in harmony." Having children who enjoy each other's company, who are kind and supportive of each other, that's what we want. So what part do we play in making it happen? Well, I don't have any pat answers. I consider myself a fellow traveler with you on the parenting journey, quite a bit farther along the road, but after all, are we ever done being moms? Never. But I did spend more time at the many of your section of the road than I would have imagined when I brought home my first baby from the hospital. I never would have thought I would have enjoyed 25 consecutive years with a preschooler at home. Sometimes, usually, more than 1 preschooler. And along the way, I wrote a book for teens about the sibling relationship. And in the process, I talked to over 100 teenagers, lots of experts, and I read a lot on the subject. So this morning, I thought I'd share some of the things I've learned during my own roller coaster journey of parenting, but also some of the research and thoughts and ideas that I've picked up from others. And it's only been in recent years that experts have realized the impact that siblings have on personality in an individual, as well as relationships with each other. I imagine none of these experts had more than 1 child. Brothers and sisters are the ones who know you best. They knew you when. They've seen the real you, and they share the same background, the same car on family vacations, the same family jokes, and maybe the same painful memories. The specialists I talked to called the sibling relationship an apprenticeship for life, a preparation for marriage, and a bridge to peer relationships. One psychologist said that kids who have brothers and sisters have a huge leg up in social relationships. But that doesn't mean the relationship a child has with a sibling will be a smooth one for kids or for parents. And here are some different takes on the sibling relationship. Quote, "Sisters are petals of the same flower, joined in the center by love." And then we have Charlie Brown. "Big sisters are the crabgrass in the lawn of life." And what about brothers? Well, here are 2 quotes. "A brother is a friend who makes growing up easier." And then, "My brother was always there to pick me up when I fell down." Of course, he was the one who pushed me. So, the sibling relationship is a complex one, but I'm just going to focus on one part of the whole panorama today. For parents, the crazy-making one, the issue of sibling conflict. Well, we want our kids to get along and our home to be a harmonious place. And I think we sometimes feel that if we just have a good attitude, we can make that happen. Instead, we often find ourselves dealing with kids who will fight over whose cupcake has the most frosting, Who saw the red car first? It's happened. And on and on. And we might think about rethinking this whole parenthood deal, or at least ready to check into a Four Seasons for the rest of our life with room service. And so I hope that today we can, by talking about this, help each other to smooth out some of the bumps in the road, avoid the potholes, or at least encourage each other to hold on when the going's rough. And I liked your little slogan there, sharing the best and helping each other with the rest. I think that fits in with our approach to our sibling problems too. One main bump is that our expectations of what the whole sibling relationship will look like, it doesn't always or often match the real thing. And it might help to know that even experts find the road bumpy when it comes to their old families. A friend who is also a family therapist told me this story. 2 psychologists had a second child. They had prepared in every way possible to make the sibling relationship start off on a high note. In the first place, after researching that there seems to be the least conflict between siblings that are 3 years apart, the new baby arrived when the oldest child was 3 years old. They had followed every guideline to ease the older child's transition by explaining everything carefully, by including the child in the preparation, by going to the hospital on the special sibling tour, reiterating how much they loved that child, and she seemed to be looking forward to the event as much as they were. Then they brought the new baby home for the first time. The 3-year-old looked at her new baby brother in his cradle, and then up at her parents and spoke, "Hate baby." So as we can see from this example, children in a family sometimes from the very beginning can have a sense of rivalry for their parents' affection, even if the parents do everything right. And this is something you're dealing with or will be dealing with, having a new baby arrive in the family, I do have a few notes on the handout that might give some help in preparing for that. And I'm sure many of you can add to that. Well, rivalry for parental attention is one kind of conflict. Siblings can clash just because they have different temperaments, sharing the same space, want the same thing, are bored, or just like to push each other's buttons. We can't control everything, but the way we handle these kind of conflicts can make a difference into whether they escalate into an unhealthy rivalry. But there's nothing that pushes a parent's buttons so strongly as their children fighting. We aren't just exasperated or angry, but hurt. We can even feel powerless and that we are failures as parents. I think it's especially true if we have had that rosy image in our minds of what our families should look like. And it doesn't include starting the day at 7 a.m. with 2 kids fighting over who gets to look at the white sugar bowl. Several times in the past, someone has said to me, "Boy, I'd like to be a fly on the wall at your family dinner times." Talk about masochism. Well, I'll spare you a dinner scenario, but this is a real-life account of one Sunday morning quite a few years ago now, which illustrates some of the sibling dynamics that make moms want to try another profession. And I have to warn those of you who are considering adding to your family that there is dialogue that may impact that decision. I would also like to add that the names are the actual names, except for the mom's, who wishes to remain anonymous. So the time is Sunday morning. The scene opens in the parents' bedroom as mom is awakened by 2-year-old Katie, her face about 2 inches away, her curly red hair standing out like a fuzzy halo. "Breakfast, Mommy," the face is saying. "Get up, get up." The action and the mom and Katie move to the kitchen. In the kitchen, Tim, 12, is fixing bagels for himself. Upon his mother's appearance, he immediately complains in a tone that implies that it is her fault. "This cream cheese won't spread." Next on the scene is Danny, 7, who is fully dressed. Mom, "Dan, how great, you're ready for church." Tim, "Now you just have to wait 2 hours. Where are his shoes? I bet he won't be able to find them, and you'll be late for church." That's what he always does, makes us late. Danny, "Can I have a bagel?" Tim, "No, the bagels aren't for the little kids." Mom, "Yes, Danny, you can have a bagel." Tim, "Not if I take them down to my room." Next. Oops. Before Mom can reply, Katie, the 2-year-old, grabs Mom's robe, waving a box of cornflakes. I want this cereal. I want this cereal. And I'm looking at it. Defiant glances all around. Danny, well, I want the floured bowl. There is only one floured bowl. Katie, I'm looking at the sugar. This is the white sugar bowl referred to earlier. Mommy, get my bagel. And this is one of the reasons Katie at that stage of her life was often referred to as the Lady Catherine. Tim, bagel now finished, has picked up the Sunday paper and addresses Danny. I'm taking the comics, Danny. Danny, can I have my bagel now? Tim, heading out of the kitchen carrying the comics. How can you if they're in my room? Mom finds the bagels hidden behind the juice on the counter, fixes one for Dan. Next on scene, the twins, Andrew and Russell, age 5. They are dragging comforters and grumbling. Russell, I want to look at the cornflakes. Danny, I just got them. Mom, okay, we'll have to use the egg timer. Those are those little hourglass things you use for games. Mom gives the timer to Russell, who fixes it with an eagle eye. Andrew, the other twin, grabbing the milk carton. I can pour the milk. I can pour the milk. I won't spill it. I can do the sugar. Grabs the sugar bowl. Katie, I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it. Begins to cry. Andrew, I want it. He pours the entire contents of the sugar bowl on his cereal. Russell, I want cocoa. Andrew, I want it first. So that's enough. I get this little piece of reality scenario as a background to show how crazy-making the whole sibling picture can be, even when we're sweet and wonderful as moms. Our challenge is to keep those exasperating moments from escalating into unhealthy rivalry. And like me, you might often feel frustrated or angry or disappointed in yourself as a parent because of how your children can act toward each other. And you might ask yourself, is that how it's going to be until they leave for college? Well, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is there will be conflict between brothers and sisters, and it might not go away the minute they become teenagers. In fact, my twins were once suspended from junior high for fighting with each other. And they still remember it, too. And I didn't want to remind them because it almost started up again. And the good news, maybe not for parents, but for your kids' long-range adjustment to the world, is that sibling conflict is normal and not necessarily bad. One psychologist I talked to said that sibling conflict provides an opportunity in a benign setting to teach children about living with other people before they have to learn it in the outside world where people might not be so supportive. Of course, it's hard to remember that when your 4-year-old whacks the 2-year-old who's just destroyed the 4-year-old's Lego castle. Or as happened one Christmas time when 2 of my boys got in a knockdown, drag-out fight over who got to light the Advent candle as I was reading about the angel's message of peace and goodwill on earth. So what is it that children gain from these interactions that are so threatening to a parent's sanity? And here are a few things they can learn from sibling conflict. How to negotiate and work out differences. How to share resources, whether of parents or things. That they are important, but not the only important one. How to deal with concepts of fairness, with putting up with a younger sibling who irritates, or with the resentment felt when an older sibling gets to do something a younger one doesn't. They learn about the use and abuse of power, which ways to express frustration work and which don't, how to deal with differences and resolve them, and last but not least, loyalty in spite of conflict. So should we just sit back and let them have at it? Well, there are some parental downsides, or potential downsides, besides destroying your house, in allowing dissension to be the primary ingredient of family dynamics. If sibling conflict is too intense and unresolved, seeds are sown for problems in future interaction, definitely with siblings, but also with others, and this kind of conflict can even have a negative impact on later marriage relationships. And surprise, surprise, what kids learn in negative interactions with each other are not always good skills to carry into adulthood. A knockdown, drag-out fight over who gets to use the copy machine next is not welcomed in the office, for example. Since the area of the brain relating to judgment has not yet fully developed, children often are poor problem solvers and frequently use the very same strategies to deal with the conflict that started it in the first place. So that's where parents come in. And the things we can't change, there are things we can't change, such as our children's temperaments. Some personalities are going to fit well with each other and some are going to clash. Given that, what can we do to help our children develop good relationships as well as learn to resolve conflicts in a healthier way? And I'd like to address a couple of areas where we as moms can have an impact. First of all, we can model conflict resolution ourselves. Our relationship with our husband or other adult family members can set the tone of the family, and it also provides an example for how to interact with another person. It's not that there isn't conflict, but that kids see how to resolve it, as well as what reconciliation and forgiveness looks like. It's important for them to hear us say, "I'm sorry," when it's called for. Well, we can model conflict resolution, and then also another thing we can do is to treat each child as an important individual. It might surprise you to know that your relationship with each child has a lot to do with how they feel about their brother or sister. One of my favorite books about sibling relationships is called Loving Each One Best by Nancy Samalin. And the title expresses the goal and the challenge when parenting more than one child, giving each child individual attention and importance. Time with each child is crucial both for the child's development and for his or her relationship with siblings. This was brought home to me early in my parenting years when my oldest child was having trouble adjusting to preschool. And his teacher asked me, "Do you really focus on him when you're with him, or are you always doing something else, like taking care of the other kids or or doing dishes, etc.?" I had he was the oldest of 3 preschoolers at the time. And it really brought me up short because with 3 preschoolers' needs and demands to satisfy, I realized I was usually distracted. And the teacher's comments helped me make the most of even short moments with my son and with each of my other kids too. So we can model conflict resolution, we can treat each child as an individual, and a third way we can impact the sibling relationship is the way we handle the main issues that come up when dealing with more than one child. And the 3 I'm going to address are fairness, comparison, and the temptation to be Judge Judy. 1, fairness. The first one. Sometimes I think the first phrase a child learns is, "It's not fair." And my husband's answer, "Life is not fair," did not seem to end the discussion. If you have 2 preschoolers close in age, fairness might mean doing exactly the same thing for each one. One Christmas, we thought we were doing the smart, treating each as an individual by giving each one of my twins a different object. One of them got a ride-on train engine with a caboose, and the other one got a very similar truck that you could ride on. Well, Christmas morning, the train was it. Truck, no one wanted that. So there was such a battle that we had to put both things away, and the next day my husband went out and got another train. So sometimes that kind of solution keeps things fair. However, most of the time it's impossible to treat each kid exactly the same. The aim should be to treat each child fairly without favoring one child. Family rules are always a good thing because they're sort of impersonal, and kids do better with, "It's not from me, well, it's a family rule," Should be understood, especially when there are big age differences. For example, you don't want your toddler running around with a Frappuccino just because your teenager has one. In our family, one big perk for being an older sibling had to do with the right to have special teenager food. But certain rules were understood. Big kids got the frozen pizza, but they couldn't flaunt it in front of the younger ones. When my son Tim, he of the bagel and comics episode, was about to graduate from high school and looking forward to going away from college, his younger brother Danny, now moving into the oldest at home category, was somewhat sad at the thought of Tim leaving, but consoled himself with the thought, expressed with great satisfaction, "Now I'll get the pizzas." So in the area of fairness, as in so many, communication is key. If a child is truly upset by an issue, you can ask, "What is it that seems unfair?" and have a dialogue about it. It doesn't mean that you'll change what you're doing, because you have to remember you're the parent, But even if you can't completely satisfy a child, at least they'll feel better for having been able to be heard. And it also helps to involve kids in setting up some of the family rules, such as TV watching or chores or whatever. So we can help our kids get along by modeling conflict resolution ourselves, and by treating each child as an individual, and then also trying to be fair, maybe not equal, but fair. And then another area that we have an impact is in the area of comparing. And comparing one child to another is, as one expert pointed out, a formula for sibling rivalry. Comparison creates great resentment against the so-called good child, and if it's intended to promote good behavior, it doesn't work. Several high school kids that I talked to mentioned this, and boy, their voices got heated. One of them said, "It gets you to rebel." Labels such as she's the student, he's the family troublemaker, etc., put a child in a role that's hard to change, and it also causes resentment. A third main area where what parents can do to help prevent rivalry from developing between siblings is avoiding the Judge-Judy role. A frequent question from parents is, how do you know when to get involved in their bickering and when to leave it up to them to work it out? And that definitely is in the 5-star category of parenting questions. And surprisingly, most experts advise staying out of the dispute as much as possible, avoiding taking the role of judge. Instead, they say a parent's role should be to provide guidance. Of course, you need to step in when physical or verbal abuse that threatens a child's well-being, but too much parental involvement in sibling disputes can backfire, said John Platt, a family counselor I spoke to. He said when parents always get involved in their children's fights, there tend to be more fighting, not less. Part of the problem is that each child wants to win by getting the parent on his or her side, and the one who loses stores up resentment to use the next time. So rivalry, which is always lurking under the surface of conflict, it comes right out in the open. Well, how the guidance versus judge role plays out is always unpredictable, but I will give you an example of how it worked for me one time, and I do emphasize one time. My twins, this is payback. I use my twins a lot because they say that siblings closest in age often have the most conflict, and they were 20 minutes apart. So they had a few moments of conflict as they were growing up. Well, this time I was in the shower and I was hurrying to get ready for a busy day, and I heard a big commotion and shouting. He threw his cereal at me, he pushed me, I did not, and then hammering on the bathroom door. Outside were my 10-year-old twins, Andrew and Russell. Well, I grabbed for a towel and I took a moment to think, which isn't always my style. I told him to wait while I put my robe on. And then I had decided to see what would happen if I refused to accept the judge role. So I put my robe on and we walked out to the kitchen, and I kept silent while each of them was telling me their side of the story. From what I could sort out, Russell had been standing in front of the open pantry door with his bowl of cereal, reading the cereal boxes. And Andrew had gone past and pushed him, whether inadvertently or not, I don't know, throwing the cereal bowl, splashing into the pantry. So Russell had immediately turned around and thrown his entire cereal bowl at Andrew. So it splattered Andrew, the floor, the cupboards. Upon arriving at the scene, I stood silently at the kitchen door, and I was just amazed that one bowl of cereal could cover so much ground. So I said to the boys, I'm not very happy about this. We are leaving for school in 15 minutes, and everything better be cleaned up before we go. I'm going to get dressed. So I went back to my room with no idea of what my boys would do or what I would do if this didn't work. However, when I returned 15 minutes later, the boys were talking together and getting their backpacks ready, and there wasn't any cereal or milk in evidence. The floor was pretty sticky, but, And I said, I was upset that you were fighting and made such a mess, I said, but I appreciate how well you work together to solve your problem. Sounded just like a psychologist. But from this incident, Andrew and Russell learned several things. They had to come up with a solution to a dispute on their own, regardless about their feelings of who had caused what. In the process of cleaning up the kitchen, they learned about consequences to behavior, and as they cleaned, they were able to work through their anger with each other. Well, that's one example, but every situation is different. And one parenting expert gave these concrete suggestions. And he said that when a fight happens between siblings, a parent has three options. First one, step in and end the battle. This is the approach when one child is unmercifully teasing, bullying, or hurting another. You can separate the combatants, say, I love you both, and I won't allow you to hurt each other. So you can do that. You can stop and end the battle. The second option is to teach them skills for managing the conflict. You can suggest strategies for trading or taking turns, or such as the egg timer method. A third option is to allow them to solve the conflict themselves, as I did with the Cheerios incident. Even if the older one is clearly taking advantage of but not hurting the younger one. As this advisor says, how else will the younger child learn to stand up for himself or herself? When children are younger, parents need to be more involved. As they get older, it's better to make it their problem, not ours, as long as certain limits are in place. Family rules could include no hurting, no disturbing parents, no tattling. And then, suggests this expert, if the rules are broken, send both children to their rooms, making no attempt to determine why the fight broke out or who was right or wrong. So I've talked, and I hope you'll have a chance in a few minutes to talk a bit about how we as parents can improve our children's relationship with each other through modeling conflict resolution ourselves, treating each child as important individuals, and handling issues such as fairness, comparison, and sibling fights. There is another positive step we can take to see what and that is to see what we can do to lessen the opportunities for sibling meltdown. If there's a lot of conflict, take some time to look at what's really behind it, and if there's something that can change the situation. One thing to do is to conduct a personal in-house survey to determine when kids have the most problems with each other. Is it that terrible hour before dinner? Maybe they're having a hard time waiting. One friend of mine served what she called an appetizer course, fruit slices, veggies with dip, or a similarly nutritious but fun to eat food that helps stave off starvation and fighting until the meal, while she was fixing the dinner, until the meal was ready. Maybe kids are tired and have had a little too much togetherness by afternoon. Maybe the younger one needs a nap, or the older one needs time alone, or mom needs a break. My own personal need powered our family's sacred nap time rule. Everyone in their rooms for at least an hour every afternoon. The older kids didn't have to sleep, but they had to stay put. And I won't tell you what I had to do to get this to work, but it did. Everyone benefited from the enforced solitude, even the kids. Well, if you see that possessions are an issue, maybe things are a little too loose around the house regarding what belongs to whom. Establish family rules regarding personal possessions. And for some reason, saying it's a family rule makes it okay, that no one has to share unless they want to. Well, if you can't figure out what to do to change things, call in reinforcements. It's hard to see what's going on when you're too close to the action, too frazzled, or too overwhelmed. So you can try getting advice from a professional or other unbiased third party. Sometimes they can offer a why didn't I think of that solution to an issue you haven't been able to resolve. And this happened to me one summer. I had 5 children at home under the age of 10 who woke up every morning determined to irritate as many of their siblings as possible. At my wit's end, I talked to a friend who is also a family therapist. How about changing the dynamics you've got going on, she said. She advised getting a babysitter every afternoon to take 2 of the children out, a different 2 every time. And I couldn't afford to do every afternoon, but I arranged so that once a week, Jennifer, who was a student at a nearby college, had a car, took 2 of my kids out that afternoon, and then we switched around different kids. And even with the change in routine, only one afternoon a week, the impact was amazing. The 2 lucky ones who went with Jennifer got along beautifully once away from home. And even the behavior of the 3 at home improved as I was able to better orchestrate some good times for them to share. And it even had an impact on their behavior the rest of the week. And I think probably more important, it changed my attitude. I no longer felt overwhelmed and incompetent, so I was better able to control what went on the rest of the time. Well, the last, but by no means the least area where we moms can make a difference in how our kids are getting along is creating what I like to call cocoa and marshmallow moments. And research has shown that it is the level of conflict balanced with the level of warmth or support in relationships that determines the effect conflict has on children. Moms, and dads too, of course, but we're all moms here, can have a big influence on the warmth by orchestrating fun times together, family outings, family celebrations, even just sharing hot cocoa together on a rainy day. That's assuming we get one. It doesn't take money, but it takes imagination and perseverance. And one thing that I did one summer, I've tried many things that didn't work. That's why I say the perseverance part. But one thing I did one summer, it turned out better than I could have expected, was what I called the mystery tailgate. And I got the idea from football tailgating, and we happened at that time to have a car that had an actual tailgate. So I told the kids this week, I did it for 1 week, I said, we're going to have a mystery tailgate week, tailgater. So every morning I wouldn't tell the kids anything about where we were going, just that we were going on this mystery tailgate. And I had donuts and cocoa in a thermos, and each morning we will tailgate at a different Santa Barbara parking lot. The beach, the Botanic Garden, the Natural History Museum, the zoo, and once at their dad's office parking lot. We put the tailgate down, laid out a cloth, and I brought the cocoa or lemonade, and we stopped for donuts the first day and had other treats the other days. And then we did the activity wherever we were. The first time I did it, Andrew was 8 at that time, went crazy. He could not stand not knowing what we were doing. Just awful. He just pestered me unmercifully, and I resisted. So the next day he said, blindfold me. I don't want to know where we're going. So the rest of the week I drove the car with 5 blindfolded kids, even the 2-year-old. And they still talk about it, and it really set our summer off on a good note. So I couldn't keep it up the whole summer, but every now and then, or the years between, we would do another mystery tailgater periodically. So I'd like to close by encouraging you not to lose sight of the big picture. When daily sibling sparring makes you wonder if your kids will ever like each other, remember that conflict is only part of the intricate bond between siblings. And strangely enough, as Nancy Samalan points out in Loving Each One Best, conflict can actually help siblings create bonds with each other. Many of the stories they laugh over later in life come from conflicts they had in childhood. Andrew and Russell still have many more shared stories than the Cheerios ones, but they, at 28, are still best friends, and they even spend most weekends together. And remember Tim and Dan and the bagels. In spite of their often acrimonious history, who was it who came to me to advocate for Dan when Dan wanted to get his first set of drums? Tim said, Mom, you need to let him get them. He's really good. And who surprised Dan when Dan's band played in San Francisco not too long ago, but Tim, who had driven 2 hours on a work day and waited until midnight to see Dan play for 20 minutes. So can we, as moms, eliminate the sibling wars? No, but there is a great deal we can do. We can pray for guidance and wisdom to make our family environment a place of nurture. We can accept that reality is different from expectations. We can try to understand what we can change and what we can't. We can try to minimize sources of conflict. We can help our children learn to resolve their differences. We can create warm moments. We can keep the big picture in sight. And when all else fails, we can get some really good earplugs, a good book, and see if there's any Frappuccinos left. Probably not. So.
Pam. Does anyone have any questions for Pam before we go into our table, discuss if we've got some questions for this one. Anybody? Okay, well, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
What was the age difference from your youngest to your oldest?
19 years.
And
Yep.
it was 9 children.
9 children, yeah. Yeah, we,
What were their ages?
what?
What were all the ages?
Well, when they were younger, now they're
The
old.
youngest one was born.
Oh, when the youngest one was born, the oldest was 19, then an 18, then 16, 17, and then, on down. So, I know, I was briefly on a jury once, and the attorney said, I see that, first of all, you had to tell what your spouse and your children, what their jobs were. And I said, well, I got about 3 down, and I said, oh, well, I don't care. So anyhow, yeah, so they're a lot of fun. And my oldest son, who lives in Seattle, had all 6 brothers for a football weekend, and one of them, they chipped in to get one there that didn't have any money, so,
It's so hopeful to hear the picture, when you're dealing with the little ones at home, just to hear those.
But maybe no one has any kids that fight, so I don't know.
That's true.
It's good to see that you lived through it.
Just to let you guys know, some of you know that my friend Marlo, who's a children's pastor, was supposed to be here and had a little emergency in her life that she had to tend to, and we supported her. She's going to be back on October 24th, but we were so blessed to have Pam step in literally 5 days ago. So thank you,
Oh,
Pam.
well,
so
you're
much
welcome.
for being with us.
Glad to do it.